Based on the initial conversations that I was having, I literally hand drew on a piece of paper sample UI. And I took that to different ambulance companies and I was like, does this make sense to you?
Welcome to Dollar Gujarati, a show about successful Gujarati entrepreneurs and professionals in America. We talk with them about their ideas and struggles on the road to success in this land of opportunity. As immigrants ourselves, we want to understand the different paths that successful immigrant Gujaratis have taken to establish themselves. This will also help us to navigate our journey in America. Today, we have Nupur Mehta, the founder of OTAInfo, as our guest. Nupur has shifted to America when she was in the 8th grade. Since coming to America, she has adapted to the American culture and she went to school in America, dropped out, and founded a company, was part of Y-Combinator, and has now started her second company. She's here to share her amazing experiences as being a Gujarati immigrant in America. Hi, Nupur.
I'm so excited to be here.
So, I think we were just discussing with Nupur before the recording started about how she shifted to America in the 8th standard. Am I correct?
That's correct.
How did you manage this change? Because I think at eight in the 8th standard, you're just breaking into the teenage years.
Yeah, so I actually was born in Baroda and grew up in the city called Surat. And that's where I stayed for until I was 13. Moved to Cupertino, as you said, in 8th grade. Like it was quite a change, definitely a culture shock. The biggest changes that I experienced was the education system. Like in India, there was not much enforcement about, like actually understanding the concepts because we are covering so much material in such a short amount of time. We are really focused on, like ratto mari rahisu ape, right? Like just memorize it, a lot of things. But here, when I came to 8th grade, my teacher would like literally sit down with me and make sure that I understood the concept, right? And there was a lot more practical implementations of those concepts as well, right? Like we would just learn about one small thing and spend a whole week just doing different experiments that explain that small concept. So the whole way learning happened was very different, and it was definitely a culture shock. I realized that I did not know how to do critical thinking.
So how did you go from, having these struggles of, communicating in the written form or even in the verbal form to studying at USC? I mean, USC is I think one of the biggest undergraduate programs in the country, and I would say it's in the top 20 in the country, comparable to the Ivy League on the East Coast sometimes. So, what's your journey been to USC?
It's funny that you ask because I still don't know how I got in. It was a total surprise. Like definitely USC was on the list of schools where they were like, okay, because I was transferring. So the first 2 years of my college, I went to De Anza and then I was going to transfer to USC. So usually all of these private colleges do not accept transfers. Like if you look at Harvard, Stanford, and a lot of those programs, if you transfer there, you'll almost restart your whole college career. Um, because a lot of units don't transfer from one institution to another, unlike UCs and other colleges, which have a whole way of transferring students. So it was definitely a surprise when I got in and I had a choice to make between some of the best institutions. And I ended up choosing USC because of their business administration program, because all the other schools I got into had like a business economics program. But I really was sold on the entrepreneurship side of things. And of course, then I feel like college is all about meeting people and exposing yourself to new environments and new, the way of thinking, and kind of you might end up meeting your co-founders while you are at college, right? That was one of the main things, like the network that it provides.
So back
So
then also you were sold on entrepreneurship that, oh yes, I am going to be an entrepreneur.
yeah, actually, funny story. I started my first company in high school. So I was working, the first company was based on the idea that I just mentioned about different learning systems and how critical thinking was emphasized so much in US. And at that time, India, critical thinking was not the main focus. It has definitely changed over the course of years. But the first company that I started was in ninth or 10th grade. It didn't go too far, but we built a product, kind of got it to users towards that
What
time.
was this company? What was the
Yeah, so
product?
it was called Veracity, and it was what Khan Academy is now, with the quizzes and the step-by-step explanation of different problems, uh, but with like live feedback. So we were using cameras to understand where the user's eyes were going, to understand what part they were really stumbled upon, where the monitor was, I mean, the mouse cursor was moving, things like that. So we adapted and created a very comprehensive system uh, with critical thinking and getting user feedback. Yeah.
Wow.
But then SATs got in the way, so
Did you enjoy your time at USC? How was it? Because you dropped
right.
out of USC. So what led you to make that decision?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I definitely, the good part was the meeting people and kind of having great conversations with your professors and things like that. But in addition to all of that, I was really sold on the startup ecosystem and I really missed Bay Area, right? Like Bay Area, you have a different vibe for sure, where there are a lot of events happening. But when I was at USC, the only hub for startup events was in Santa Monica. And it would literally take me like a 1.5 hour drive ish to get to Santa Monica. And I would have to plan so much ahead. I think it was winter break. Yes, it was winter break. I came home and I was like, oh my God, I really miss this energy that the Bay Area or Silicon Valley provides. And just as a joke, while talking to my parents, I said, why don't I take 6 months off, right? Like, can I just like take a leave of absence and come back and work on a company? And one thing led to another. And before I knew it, I was emailing my counselor saying, how do I take a leave of absence? And
And what did
yeah,
your I mean
parents say,
Gujarati parents
they were
માર્ક્સ ક્યાં છે
considered,
શું કરશે પછી ડિગ્રી તો જોઈએ ને so
yeah.
so how did your parents respond to you asking like you considering dropping out?
Yeah, so surprisingly, my parents were very supportive in the beginning, which I was also like taken aback by. I was like, wait, are you sure? Like, you understand what I'm saying? But I think they didn't know what they were signing up for until much later. But after we got into YC and kind of started getting traction with our startup, they understood where I was coming from and they're like, okay, kasut to kari rahi che.
So where did you hear about Y Combinator and how did you get involved? So before we go into YC also, like how did you what was your idea with replenish, your first startup that got funded?
Mhm.
So how did you come up with that idea and how did you know that yeah, this is an idea worth pursuing?
Right. That's a great question because a lot of times you don't know if you have gotten product market fit, and it is all about experimentation until you get to that point. So when we were starting off Replenish, like none of our team members were actually from the ambulance industry itself, right? So Replenish, just a quick one-liner. Our pitch was each ambulance run from end to end is 2 hours long, and we are spending 40 minutes on doing paperwork. So we were reducing those 40 minutes to 4 minutes by automating a lot of paperwork that was happening. And when like this was just based on one small incident that I had while interning at Stanford Hospital. So I was at the Goodman Simulation Lab, and paramedics had come to train with the robotic patient, but there was a lot of delay that was happening. Uh, when they were spending maybe 10 minutes with the patient itself, but 30 to 40 minutes just discussing what happened in those 10 minutes. And at that time I was like, they're probably just training, and that's why it's taking so much time. But I decided to dig a little bit deeper, and the more I talked to different paramedics and different companies, the more I realized that this was normal. Like if you finished your paperwork in 30 to 40 minutes, like that was that was ideal. And this was part of their process as well. So after each ambulance drops off their patient, they literally are allotted a whole hour just to finish their paperwork. Like that's 1 hour of free time. And to find this out, during the course of replenish, the customer development phase, we traveled to anywhere where I could find cheap tickets. So this was before we had funding, right? Like we didn't know anything. So I would just like, Aje kaya city ma jawu che. Okay. Because ambulances are everywhere, right? So I would just go to a different city every day. And sometimes it involved flying, of course. Go Southwest, cheap tickets. um, and I would just like walk to different ambulances, knock at their door, and be like, I'm a student right now trying to learn more about the ambulance industry. Can you tell me about your process? And they were more than happy to walk us through the whole. Yeah, go ahead. What's the question?
So you literally just went up to the ambulances and asked the first responders for like you just start asking them what are their problems and like what how can we make it better?
Exactly. So the first question was basically like, tell me about your job, right? Like, what do you do? Because you don't know anything about the industry itself. I didn't know how ambulances worked. I didn't know they were private. I didn't know they were separate from the fire and the police, right? Which are run by government. So there was a huge learning curve involved. But the good thing that came out of it was with all the people that I was approaching, like name any state, I'm sure I've met like a lot of the ambulance companies within that state in US. At some point, we were even talking with the head of disaster response in Singapore, India, right? So we did not stop anywhere. Like anybody who would give me information, I was like, please teach me.
Wow, that is quite something. Because I mean, traveling to all these different cities and then actually going to the customer, like your customer is actually these the people who work with the ambulances, and that's very different from how a lot of people do entrepreneurship back in India, where they're like, okay, papano dhando છે તો એમાં બેસી જઈએ, or let's buy some product and then see if it sells.
Yeah,
Whereas before building the product out, only you actually went and figured out what was the problem.
exactly. I think that is very important. Like that is one of the bases, right? If you have the product market fit and you have customer segment identified and a problem that is a hair burning problem, then the rest of the things can be figured out. But if you don't have the foundation set, it is much harder to go to the next step. And there will be a lot of investment of money and resources if you don't figure out step one.
Yeah, that is so true. And I mean, if you don't have the first step figured out, then you're just going to waste a lot of time afterwards.
Exactly. So identifying the problem was the easy part because I loved just talking to people. At some point, it became a game, right? Like how much information can I get? Can I get them to sign up? So when I initially took the time off of USC, we got into Founder Institute, which was an early stage incubator program. And they used to push us. Like they would say, you have to talk to 50 people within a week and figure out your problem, right? And at some point, I remember I talked to 200 different ambulance companies in 1 week. uh,
Wow.
yeah. So they were really pushing us and kind of, helping us figure out where we are focused and where our problem really lies. They were also asking us to get like somebody to commit. Can you get one person to commit to your idea? And at that point, I had just started off, right? Like I was barely maybe a month or two into the industry. I did not have the technical knowledge whatsoever to actually build the product. So what I did was, okay, I have to get a customer to say yes to me when I have some idea about the problem and I don't have a product. So what I did was based on the initial conversations that I was having, I literally hand drew on a piece of paper sample UI. And I took that to different ambulance companies and I was like, does this make sense to you? And would you pay me money for this? So that's exactly how we got our first LOI, right? So they were just like, yes, this makes sense to me. I'm happy to support you in any way you want. Let's make this happen. So
LOI is letter of
letter of
intent.
intent, exactly.
So
Yeah,
basically, these ambulance companies, they were saying that if you build this product, we will buy it.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you came up with the idea for replenish, like what did other people tell you? Like what did your friends tell you? What did your parents tell you? What did perhaps, like if you were in touch with your professors, what did they tell you? Like how did your close ones respond to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people like didn't understand what was happening initially because first of all, like we were all so young at that point, and just to kind of uh, go against the norm and do something, but at the core of it, everybody was very supportive, right? So like about the idea, I'm not so sure if all of the people understood it or not in the initial like first few months or not. But as I also started getting clarity, I was able to better communicate that idea. Everybody understood the problem and they're like, oh my God, yes. But I think the biggest thing that was common was the support, right? The unwavering support that whatever you are doing, we are right behind you. And if you need any help, like that's how I found one of like the first co-founder I had was because I was working with my friends group in the library and I needed some help. And she was just helping me with a few things at that point. And she ended up joining us. So first few even like hires that we did were all my friends who were like quote unquote doing their internships and bringing whatever expertise they had to help replenish move forward. So it was a amazing journey where like it was just a different environment, different mindset, and I was overwhelmed with all the support for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think your environment and how much they support you really matters. I
Definitely,
mean, it's easy to say, stay positive, have positive thinking, but I think the entire ecosystem has to be like your friends and family, they have to be the ones who help you stay positive.
definitely. Agreed. 120%.
All right. And so you were able to build out this product and
Yeah.
then, then I guess, how did so building the product also would have taken money, and I'm sure that that's why you started looking for funding. So
Right.
how did Y Combinator like happen? I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that our listeners are really interested in knowing, that how does one actually get into Y Combinator? Because I think um, there are two aspects to it. One is the prestige aspect because I at least I see Y Combinator a comparison to Harvard because of the acceptance rates. And the other thing is also that Y Combinator actually the network that you get from Y Combinator can help you solve a lot of problems. And in fact, that is a big thing that Gujaratis also have had in the past. It's like
Right.
I know someone who can help me out with same financing or advice, or they're able to connect me to the right customer or the right manufacturer.
Right.
And that is actually a Gujarati business model. And
Correct.
so how did Y Combinator happen?
Definitely. So Y Combinator was a total surprise. I think like we were talking with one of the partners there initially, and I, my co-founder and I literally sent a Snapchat to Justin Khan, who's another partner at YC, saying that we have applied to YC and this is our pitch, right? On Snapchat. It was literally a Snapchat. I don't know why or how he opened our Snapchat, but he opened and responded. And
Oh, wow.
yeah. So our first application to YC was through a Snapchat. And
For our listeners who don't know who Justin Khan is, he is the co-founder of Twitch and Justin.tv. Twitch was bought by Amazon for I think around $1 billion,
yeah.
or at least at that valuation. So and Justin Khan is a big deal.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was we 1 month later we found out that we actually made it to the next step, which was a total surprise because even filling out the application, I think it was like 3 days before the application was due. I was in a conference like South by Southwest in Austin, and my co-founder was in California, and we were like, okay, like let's just try it and we will see what happens. So like while at a conference, we like at nights we were working on the application. I think we spent maybe one night filling out the whole application, and we had to make a video, and we were in two different locations. So how do we make a video happen? So actually, just like this, we did it over Skype. Both our faces were not aligned. It was completely like the quality was not good at all. But we were like, okay, we are submitting it. Let's submit it. So after that, we didn't have many expectations of making it to this next round. So when we made it, we were ecstatic. We were like, oh my God, this is happening. So there are two rounds, right? So first is the written application, and if you get accepted, out of like I think 6 to 7,000 people within our batch, 500 got 6 to 7,000 applications for our batch. 500 got interviews, and out of 500, only 100 got accepted into the actual program, 100 companies. So we were like, oh my God, we're just happy to have those 500 be part of this 500. But I still messaged Justin. I was like, we have an interview. We are like, interviewing in next week or in a few days. So we started preparing. I reached out to like XYC like alumni founders to just help us with the mock interview. And our the feedback that we got was all over the spectrum. So some were like, no, 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 this makes no sense. You're not going to get in. By the way, those same alumni are investors in our company now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And others were like, this makes sense. Just narrow down this parts of your pitch. So we were very nervous going in. One of the craziest things that we did during the interview. So these interviews are only 10 minutes long, right?
That's
Within
it?
10
Only
minutes,
10 minutes?
only 10 minutes. And within 10 minutes, they're making a decision, like whether to fund you with 125K or not. Um, so this was crazy. And one of the weakest points that we had were neither of the founders were actually from the industry. So we walked into the interview, and there was Sam Altman, there was Kasser, there was Justin Khan, and a few others that were sitting across the table from us. And we were extremely nervous at this point. I think we were, I think 19 or 20 years old at this point, I think.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of nerve-wracking. We had never done anything like this before. So it was a crazy experience. And even after the interview, the 10 minutes went by so fast, and they had so many questions. At this point, we still didn't have a product. Our product was still like we had now sketches that were online, but it was not coded or anything like that. Um, and we had our first customer identified at this point, where another ambulance company had said, okay, I'm going to use you as well. And our product was completely different than what it became towards the end of the YC term. But so again, I was there with my paper and all of that inside the interview. And we were so nervous. So the way YC works is if you get a phone call, you get in. But if you get an email, you did not get in, right? So they send feedback via email and positive news via phone call. And I don't even remember who called us. I remember being in a parking lot. I was like, okay, I need to distract myself. I was going to go like do some errands or something. And I get out of the car and I got a phone call. I remember just jumping. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah,
It,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure this phone call, I'd like to believe that this phone call actually changed your life.
definitely. Like, I think it changed the trajectory of our company completely.
You got funded by Y Combinator,
Right.
and you've got this amazing group of founders and investors backing you. So what happened with Replenish? Uh, did you make any money with Replenish? How many, like, did you have sales? And in the end, why did you decide to, uh, you know, s- stop, bring Replenish to a stop and then start with OTA info?
One of the biggest reasons for us shutting down Replenish was business model. So even though there was a lot of demand, where people really loved the product, we couldn't figure out how to make money out of it. So we were saving them around 700K per year per 100 ambulances, but they were not even willing to pay a small portion or a percentage of it that would justify our high touch B2B sales. So we had a couple options at that point. Either we figure out another business model, right? Like with the thing we did with OEMs. If the ambulances cannot pay, let's go to where the money is. So we looked
Correct.
at OEMs, we looked at hospitals. At one point, we even considered starting our own ambulance company and buying our own ambulances. um, but around the same time, like one of our then advisors and now co-founder at OTAInfo was like working on another standard in the automobile space, and we had an inbound inquiry from a really big chip manufacturer, and it became a decision between do we want to kind of continue and figure out how to build a revenue model around the ambulance companies, or should is it worth exploring this second idea that where the customer is asking us to do something. So at
So
that
that's
time, it
when
was a
you, so
really
that's
hard
when,
decision. Yeah, go ahead.
so that's when you decided to switch. Yeah, I mean, this is a really hard decision.
Yeah,
So how did you decide that you need to work on OTA info versus replenish, where you have actually invested, so many years, and you had actually taken people's money for this.
exactly. So, yeah, it was definitely not an easy decision. We actually got all of our stakeholders involved in the decision process itself. So, we used to have meetings with each one of them. What are the pros? What are the cons? What do you think about this? How should we proceed? What are some good things? What are some bad things? So, every single aspect was put under microscope and evaluated. And the midway decision that we formed was okay, let's just do a bunch of experiments. So if these experiments give us good enough sign, we will continue with OT info. And all the experiments we did, like the amount of response and the growth we were getting was nowhere compared to anything we ever got in Replenish. So at one point it just became a no-brainer, like it makes sense, let's just switch. So it was not an individual decision at all. It was taken over a course of couple of months, and everybody was on board. So it was a very smooth transition.
Wow, this is awesome. And so you're on your journey with OTA Info, which you started a year ago, and you're only 25?
Yeah.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Uh,
So Nupur, what is OTA Info? What is the company about?
so OTAInfo officially started a while ago, right? My co-founder, who has over 25 years of experience in the space, was working with a bunch of industry professionals and NYU professors to come up with a standard for automobiles. Right now, cars are getting more and more complicated and more advanced, right? So a few years ago, there was a huge recall where Jeep had to recall 1.5 million vehicles because of this vulnerability. And the vulnerability was a attacker who was sitting on the East Coast, right? Somewhere on the East Coast, took over a very specific car that was driving from LA to San Diego. And the driver could not do anything. This was thankfully done under very closed conditions, but DHS, Department of Homeland Security, was like, this is not okay. We have to come up with a solution. So they put a group of people together to come up with a proper standard to address this vulnerability. And that's what my co-founder has been part of for the past 5 years. They just submitted their IEEE specifications. And now people in the market were like, okay, we need a proper solution. And that's how OT Info started. But it has evolved to now where we can solve even things like Zoom bombing, right? That is one of the most common problem that is happening right now. How do you make sure that whoever is joining your video call, because everything is going online, is not is not going to show something that is not proper on the video chat. So we have really become, like, if I have to say a one liner, we teach devices stranger danger, right? Like you can teach a kid, but how do you teach devices that આ બધું બરાબર information નથી ને તારે એ શીખવું નહીં જોઈએ. So at the core of it, that's what we do. That's what OTA info is.
So, like, how has being a part of a Gujarati family, like, uh, helped you in this entire journey? Because generally people might think that, okay, Gujaratis are businessmen, but they are in traditional trading businesses. And this is like the startup world. It's what we read about in the news and on Twitter. So how has being a Gujarati like really, has it benefited you, or like how has it affected you?
Definitely. I think two things that really helped me. One was positivity. Like Gujarati people are so positive that whatever condition or problem you are in, you will figure it out. Like they have this like confidence and that belief. And like that, my whole family is like that. Everybody I know is like that. And that is very important, right? Like the American way to say is grit. Like whatever happens, whatever challenges come your way, you're going to surpass them. And kind of the main point is just to keep going. So that was one. And second is karkasar. Oh my God. Doesn't matter how much money or anything that you guys have. It is always important to spend the money wisely, and that is so important because in the startup journey, there are going to be a lot of hardships, right? Not always you're going to have money, like the ideal amount of money that you would want to achieve a certain goal. So being lean is a very popular concept, especially in Silicon Valley, right? Like what is the least amount of resources that you can use to prove your business, right? So, what is the smallest thing that you can do, the MVP, minimum viable product, to get the most customer feedback? What is the most hair burning problem for you to solve in the least amount of resources? So, that mentality of using your money wisely and just like focus, like આટલું જ કરવું છે અને આટલું બરાબર રીતે કરીને જોવું છે કસ્ટમર શું કહે છે. So that really helped me throughout that whole journey. I think those two things are the core of what an entrepreneur is.
Wow, that is superb. It's so heartening to hear that, કે આપણા જે parents અને grandparents જે આપણને નાનપણથી શીખવાડે છે, that is actually translated in English. It's lean startup and you know grit and determination.
You don't realize it, but they really are like, amazing Gujaratis business people.
So how much of your success do you attribute to luck versus your hard work or your intelligence?
Yeah. No, that is great question actually, because a lot of these things are more about persistence because you never know how close you are and why the other person is saying no. So luck definitely plays a role, but bigger thing is persistence. Yes, intelligence is important to a certain extent where of course you need to make sure that you're understanding the user correctly and you're taking the feedback that they are giving, but it is not the end all, right? Like I don't think intelligence is important or education as a matter of fact, right? Like if you know what a problem is and you are listening to your customers and you're solving something for them, that is the important part. And being the timing of it, right? Like being at the right place at the right time and doing it properly is execution. That is the most important part.
I have a lot of friends in the Bay Area who have come from India to study for undergrad, study for masters, and then now they're working with huge salaries in the Bay Area. I think they are some of the best salaries that you can get in anywhere in the world, especially if you're working in the tech industry. And like having founded your own startup, which was backed by Y-Combinator, uh, I'm sure that any big company in the valley would want to hire you. So what drives you to, not take up that high salaried position, that high salaried job, and still continue fighting for your own company?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the joking answer to that is you don't want to work a 9 to 5 job, right? But but you end up signing up for more than 9 to 5, right? You're working 24/7, way past that. And I think you're working towards all of that because that's what makes you happy, right? Like you have a passion to make a difference in the world that goes beyond how much money or things like that you are making. And of course, with a promise that if you make it, you're going to make it very nicely. Um, so I think it is also about like risk and reward. So yes, you might be struggling at the initial stages of it, but all that hard work is going to pay off, and not only pay off with the monetary thing, but pay off with the impact that you might leave behind in the world, and leave a positive change, and have the, gratification that you helped somebody do something.
So, how are you spending your time during the coronavirus lockdown? I've seen that you're a little bit more active on Facebook now. So, what's that? And in general, like, how are you staying productive during this time?
This was such a good time to really focus on what I wanted to do and things that I was putting off because of other priorities. So, the Instagram thing that you mentioned, right? I finally succumbed to the whole Instagram world, and joined Instagram. I think now it has officially been like a month and a half or so. And I've been creating a lot of content and journaling all the things that I've learned throughout my startup journey. So if you are interested, please follow me at one Nupur, ONE, NUPUR.
Thanks, Nupur, for coming on our show. I'm sure that our listeners will be really excited to hear you. And especially, I think all the young second generation American Indians, they'll be really looking up to you. Uh, and I'm sure that many of them may want to reach out to you.
Thank you so much for having me over. And you guys are doing an amazing job. Like I've heard of so many different like podcasts, but just putting the focus on the Gujarati entrepreneurs is an amazing and inspirational thing to do. So thank you, Jaini, Daksh, and Atit for putting this together.
Thanks for listening to the show this week. And if you want to ask us any questions or want to see someone specific on our show, write to us at dollargujarati@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us at dollargujarati. Make sure you don't miss any episode by subscribing to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or however it is that you get your podcast. I'm Dakshadai Shah, and you've been listening to Dollar Gujarati.